This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Whether you love true crime or comedy, celebrity interviews, or news, you call the shots on what's in your podcast queue. Now you can call them on your own auto insurance too with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. It works just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. Get your quote today at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Hey everybody, it's Tim Heidecker. You know me, Tim and Eric, Bridesmaids, and Fantastic Four. I'd like to personally invite you to listen to Office Hours Live with me and my co-hosts, DJ Doug Pound.
Hello.
And Vic Berger.
Howdy.
Every week we bring you laughs, fun, games, and lots of other surprises. It's live. We take your Zoom calls.
Music.
We love having fun. Excuse me?
Songs.
Vic said something.
Music.
Songs.
Music.
I like having fun. I like to laugh. I like to meet people who can make me laugh. Please subscribe now.
Especially for women who work in an office or in a kind of public space or professional space outside the home, I think that women deal with sexism, obviously, in those spaces, and ageism. And I think talking about menopause feels like just bringing attention to your age in a way that most women I know don't feel comfortable out of a sense of self-protectiveness.
Welcome to How To. I'm Courtney Martin. Today, we are going to talk about menopause. Now listen, if I'd said that 20 years ago, or even 10, even 5 maybe, a lot of you would have been shocked. But menopause is having a bit of a moment. Articles about it are going viral. New products to help cope with it are flooding the market. It seems like women are finally talking about it out loud, in public, even if still a little tentatively. And men are finally waking up to the ways in which they're affected via partners and friends by this slightly mysterious part of life. And yet, there is still such a long way to go before we more broadly and accurately understand what the hell menopause really is and how it should be treated by medical professionals. Thankfully, we've got 2 stellar guests today, including a friend of mine who is not afraid to lay it all out there.
My name is Katie. I'm 43 years old, and I am calling in from Oakland, California. I'm a cisgendered, heterosexual woman who has been in a partnership for many years, and I have no children. And I'm biracial, mixed, Black and white, and I'm obsessed with my own menopause journey.
Now, Katie suspects she is entering the early stage known as perimenopause. That's basically the on-ramp to menopause, which usually starts between ages 40 to 44. Like me, she has a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. We're both part of a women's group that meets every month here in Oakland. There are about 20 of us from diverse racial and professional backgrounds. We're mostly all in our 40s, and we talk about everything under the sun. But our recent meeting about menopause was, well, how shall I put this? Basically epic. I mean, who knew we had so many feelings and so much confusion about it? Susan Dominus did. That's who. She's a veteran New York Times journalist who published an article back in the spring that kind of broke the internet. It was called Women Have Been Misled About Menopause.
So I have to admit that when the topic was assigned to me, I did hesitate. You know, I sort of thought, am I branding myself in a certain way that maybe is not the brand that I want going forward? And it was my college friends, who were also confused about the topic themselves. They said, yeah, there is stigma around menopause, and that's why you need to write this article, because people need to change that or work towards changing that. So they scolded me into doing it. And in the end, I would say within 2 weeks of reporting it, I wrote an email to my editor and said, I think this might be the most important article I ever do. I thought it was really compelling and that there was information that women weren't getting.
It was certainly compelling to Katie and her friends.
I was forwarded this article by 13 different people. And
wow.
I forwarded it to probably another 13 or something because everyone was like, oh my God, you're like the third person who sent me this today. I think that it's because a lot of us have been noticing, things maybe changing a bit in our own bodies. Like I spent all these years getting to know my own body and what it likes and what it doesn't like. And then all of a sudden it felt like slowly none of that knowledge is like applicable anymore. And I think a lot of my women friends who, are biologically female, they also are having the same experience, but there isn't a lot of conversation about it. Menopause has always seemed like this punchline, kind of crudely drawn about, being cranky or hysterical or something like that. I didn't even know the term perimenopause until Courtney shared it with me. And, it just kind of woke up for me like, wow, there's just so much I don't know. And it really infuriated me that there's just not very much information out there available to women. Like, why isn't this more popular?
On today's show, we're going to dive all the way in. Our expert, Susan Dominus, is not a medical professional, but she has talked to about 1 million of them in her reporting on this topic and brings a wealth of knowledge. And Katie offers up her own experiences as a window into the struggle so many women have to get compassionate medical support and navigate the complicated symptoms of middle age. Now, importantly, I want to flag something. We use the term women a lot in this episode, but of course, many people who don't identify as women experience menopause. That includes non-binary and trans folks, another group of people that the medical establishment often fails. Ugh. Now, listen. Our conversation won't answer every question you have about menopause, but I guarantee you're going to learn a lot. And if you don't think this episode is for you, think again. You probably know somebody who's going through menopause right now, and this could be really helpful. So stay tuned. Labor strikes, climate change, your crappy office printer. What do they all have in common? Come on, it's all about the money. Economics is everywhere and everything fueling our lives, even when we least expect it. If you're a fan of How To and are curious to learn something new and exciting about economics every single week, check out the Planet Money podcast from NPR. Planet Money is a different kind of world where the complex economy actually makes sense, where human stories supersede abstract theories. It's econ, down to earth. Planet Money answers some of life's burning questions. Will AI take over our jobs? Is fancy vodka just fancy marketing? Why are Christmas trees so dang expensive? The Planet Money team lives to tell a good story in around 30 minutes. Tune in to Planet Money every week for entertaining stories and insights about how money shapes our world. Listen now to Planet Money from NPR, wherever you get your podcasts. This show is brought to you by Discover. In today's world, it seems the best treatment is reserved only for a few. Well, Discover wants to change that by making everyone feel special. That's why with your Discover card, you have access to 24/7 live customer service as well as $0 fraud liability, which means you're never held responsible for unauthorized purchases. Finally, no matter who you are or where you are in life, you'll feel special with Discover. Learn more at discover.com/creditcard. Limitations apply. We're back with Susan Dominus of the New York Times and our listener Katie, who is telling us about her menopause journey. Don't you just love that term? Tell us about where you feel like you are in that journey. Like, what symptoms are you experiencing? What are some of your frustrations?
Yeah, I'm experiencing many symptoms, several of which I am connecting to perimenopause on my own. And when I talked to my doctor about it, she was like, yeah, could be. So it's all a little hazy for me. But, some of the symptoms I'm experiencing are vaginal dryness and fatigue. I gain weight much more quickly, and I'm a regular exerciser. I drink alcohol socially. My tolerance has been much lower. I just got back from a trip to New Orleans, and it was like I really felt that experience a lot more intensely than I might have 5 years ago.
What happened in New Orleans did not stay in New Orleans. In other
No,
words.
ma'am. It came right back to Oakland with me.
Attention, how-to listener. Consider what you just heard to be a shot across the bow for what's ahead in this particular episode. We're going to talk about fatigue. We're going to talk about weight gain. And we're going to talk about vaginal dryness. Katie, I love that you just came right out of the gate with that. That was amazing.
I did just say vaginal dryness on this podcast, but I'm still probably going to wake up later today and be like, oh my God, I just said vaginal dryness.
That was a big one for me. I was like, if I can get through this reporting and by the end of it say vaginal dryness without even the tiniest hesitation, I know I'll have gotten somewhere in my own personal journey. I feel like when I started reporting that piece, the idea that anybody would say that those two words together in public was almost inconceivable to me. And I like to think that because of all kinds of things that are changing in the world, women can talk about it. Why shouldn't they talk about it? Because it's offensive to some people, because it makes some people go, ick. There's a lot of shame around aging and sex and the notion of older women and sexuality. It's sort of a punchline concept. And, that really has to change.
So, Susan, I wanted to sort of bring along the women who might be listening who are not ready to say vaginal dryness, those women for whom this conversation, maybe they're having it in a couple of corners of their lives, but very privately, and they still feel confused about things. Can you give us kind of a 101 definition of menopause? And in particular, the symptomology seems so broad. So what is menopause and how do you actually distinguish what a menopause symptom is?
That's such a great question. Okay, so it's funny. When I started writing this article, I would talk about the idea of going through menopause. The way doctors talk about menopause, it's not something you go through. It's a stage that you reach. And you reach that stage when a year has gone by since your last period. It's just you are menopausal. It's like an adjective. You are menopausal when you've not gotten your period for a full year. Perimenopause, you do go through perimenopause. That's an ongoing stage when, you're in kind of the last hurrahs of your reproductive cycles, I guess you could say. And your hormones are going up and down because various levels are fluctuating and other hormones are fluctuating in response to that. And your estrogen levels in general, the trend is downward. So that's what's happening during perimenopause.
How do you distinguish menopause symptoms from other things, aging, stress?
It's not always easy to distinguish menopausal symptoms or perimenopausal symptoms from just other symptoms of aging. But there's one symptom in particular that is the hallmark of this phase of your life, and that is the hot flash. Basically, your body regulation and the signals that your brain is sending to your body about what's going on in the temperature of the world around you gets just out of whack. And women have, they break out into sweats and they feel like they're burning from the inside. It can be, excruciating for some women. It can be many, many times a day. It often happens at night, and so it interrupts people's sleep. Now, there are a bazillion other symptoms that are associated with menopause. For example, people do talk about brain fog. They do talk about vaginal dryness. That does seem clearly to be a function of low estrogen levels. There are a few that I think are really overlooked a lot. And one of the ones I think is most overlooked is joint pain. And I mention that just because I sometimes fear that women go down a real rabbit hole of testing and meeting with orthopedists or rheumatologists. Is this, oh no, an immune disorder? And I'm going to list very quickly some of the symptoms that are also associated with menopause that could or could not be menopausally related. And then I'll tell you what one doctor told me she does when a woman comes to her and says, I don't know if this is aging or stress or menopause. But just quickly to go through some of the other ones, dry eyes, real dryness. I think hair loss, although it's not clear whether estrogen therapy helps with the hair loss, but certainly around menopause, a lot of women do see a thinning of their hair. Weight gain, especially around the middle. There's a certain kind of fat in your belly that your body is trying to hang on to because it actually also retains estrogen. So it's trying to like keep those last vestiges. And that's why often women during menopause, they see their body weight really shift around a lot. Those are just some of the most common ones. So what this doctor said to me was that if somebody says to her, I don't know if this is menopausal or not, she'll say to them, well, you could try hormone therapy. And if it goes away, chances are it was menopausally related. And you can also get a better sense then, like, there is possibly some risk associated, very, very, very low, especially for women in their 50s. But there is some risk associated with it, especially after 5 years. So you can see for yourself, how much better do you feel? And then you yourself can make a better risk-benefit calculation. Because if you don't have all the information, you can't really make the calculation. But if you know how much better you feel, maybe it's worth it to you. Maybe you stay on the hormones, maybe you go off the hormones, but you know what's going on.
Okay, here's our first insight, and it's a big one. Symptoms of menopause and symptoms of aging are not the same thing, but so often they're confused for one another, even by medical professionals. Katie, have you felt like you have had good conversations with your doctors around this? Because I know this is another big issue that you uncover in your reporting, Susan, is just how often doctors underestimate women's pain generally. Also, that women of color have particular experiences of menopause. So it just makes me wonder, Katie, if you feel like you're getting the right kind of care.
No, I don't. I had I'm part of an HMO plan. So I don't, even though on paper I have a regular doctor, it's actually kind of complicated to get an appointment with that specific person. So they just, like, when you want to go in and see someone, you just get whoever the person that has the soonest appointment available is, basically. I had one conversation with the person who was assigned to me that day who, she took I had gone to see her because I was in a long-term partnership and we like to have sex with each other. And it was becoming, the vaginal dryness piece was really bothering me. It was just really actually impacting my kind of self-esteem around it. So I went to have a conversation, and she was very valid. It was she's a nurse practitioner. She was very validating and offered me, made some suggestions of different alternative hormone therapies. So it's like there's a cream, and then something you could take orally. And I was sort of anticipating this really wonderful, thoughtful deep dive around what I could expect. It just wasn't like that, which I guess, thinking back on it, sort of modern healthcare.
They have 15-minute slots. Yeah.
Exactly.
So she says she gave you a prescription for vaginal estrogen cream or some kind of alternative lubricant. What did do you remember?
It was a vaginal estrogen cream. Yeah.
That seems like a really good start, I have to say.
It was, and it was very helpful.
That's great. That's great.
So yeah, I went around and told everyone, I don't know if you have this issue or not, but just tell me.
No, and actually it's really important to mention vaginal estrogen cream because unlike oral estrogen or patches, which, do have some tiny risks associated with them, especially as you get older, there really are thought to be almost no risks associated with vaginal estrogen cream. And in fact, there's a contingent of doctors, including the fantastic Rachel Rubin, who's big on Twitter on vaginal health, and they're trying to get the black box warning removed because there's really no research to back it up. It's there because oral estrogen and the estrogen patches, there's been some work, that has left doctors convinced that there are indeed risks. But for vaginal estrogen cream, there's not a lot of reason to think that there's any risks. And so I'm at least really happy that your doctor did prescribe that.
Okay, so Susan, a big part of your article is about the controversy surrounding hormone replacement therapy, or what sometimes people call HRT. Can you give us the skinny on that, just make us smarter about it?
Yeah. In 2002, the WHI, which is the Women's Health Initiative, was a massive study only on women, randomized controlled trial. There was this big needle scratch, I always say. They halted a trial after only 5 years that was intended to go for many more years, because they had found that after 5 years in the women who took this particular form of estrogen and progesterone, that there was an increased risk of breast cancer that reached a threshold that for them would have made it unethical to continue the study. Now, that's not necessarily the level at which a woman has to decide for herself, I can't take this medication. It was just sort of epidemiologically speaking, they felt at that level they had to halt the study. Many people had thought that they were going to find that hormones were great for you, that it increased your longevity, that it was, increased your heart health. When they didn't find all this great news and they found, in fact, there was some attendant risk, a lot of doctors absolutely flipped and a lot of women flipped. And it was like this cold turkey. People just stopped prescribing hormones. Women stopped taking them. There was very little nuance about what the actual increased risks were. And in women in their 50s, the increased risk was, it's the same increased risk across every age population. But if your base risk is very low, then a 26% increase of a very low risk is still a very low number. And that was really never explained to people. So that's the main reason why people stopped taking hormones for a long time. Gradually, there has been sort of advocacy around this issue. And I think there's starting to be more education. There are also different formulations of these hormones that people now think are safer. Those are observational studies. And so they're not the same as randomized controlled trials, but they're very, very good observational studies. There's differences of opinion around that, certainly, but it's certainly not as unsafe as people thought it was, understood it to be around 2002. So that's the main controversial issue, I would say, or that's sort of the summation of the controversy.
At the heart of all these controversies like this one around hormones, but also around safety, the pharmaceutical industry, and so much more, is one core question. How do we relate to women's suffering? Do we legitimize it, underestimate it, medicalize it, underplay it? The truth is, for some women, menopause isn't a huge deal, but for some, it can be life-altering. So far, Katie is navigating a space that seems like it's in between. So, Katie, when you said you didn't feel like you got the care you needed, what were you thinking of? Because it sounds like you thought that was a relatively good meeting. Have you had other encounters that were less satisfying?
Yeah, so I guess about a year ago, I had really just started to notice a lot of changes in how I was feeling, like, just noticing increasing fatigue. And I have had, you mentioned hot flashes. I have had maybe 3 or 4. And I emailed my regular doctor who is like in the system. And I thought, I need some tests. I need you to run some tests on me so I can see what's wrong with me or figure out, give me a diagnosis of some kind. And the response I got was, well, we don't really have any tests for that.
It's actually true. And be wary of the doctor who are like, well, let me take a hormone level, because especially during perimenopause, your levels are fluctuating so much that it's really just a snapshot in time.
This exchange kind of went back and forth a while, me just basically reiterating something just feels really off. And I feel like I'm just not myself. I did get certain validation, but it was just maybe a lack of engagement is a better way to put it. I was forwarded an information packet about menopausal symptoms that I could peruse at my leisure, which is exactly what I want to be doing on my leisure time. I was really wanting to get into a conversation that felt a little more personal and a little more thoughtful.
It's funny you talk about wanting a more personal moment in the doctor's office. It's and I think, I don't know if it's just in the Jewish tradition, but when a girl gets her period, her mom, it used to be, she'd slap you across the face, I think. Am I making this up? I think that was sort of the tradition. But there's a moment this is a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And so you go to the doctor and you're like, it's been 6 months since I got my period. I'm having hot flashes. You kind of want your doctor to be like, oh yeah, menopause. It's not easy. I feel you. Yeah, how can I help?
Yeah.
But, it's not necessarily doctors' jobs to hold our hands, but we can't help but want it. We're human for wanting the person we're opening up to acknowledge oh yeah, this is a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about that piece, Susan, because, full disclosure, Katie and I are in a women's group together, which had we talk about, we meet once a month, talk about everything under the sun. And our menopause meeting was deep. I mean, people had such deep feelings about it. Some people had really deep knowledge, which was amazing. We've unfortunately had some members who've been through cancer, so they've actually experienced some of the menopausal symptoms already. And so we were all sharing information, and it was just it was really a special meeting, I thought. But one of the things we ended up sort of drifting towards was this distinction between these private market solutions. Like someone had tried out the thermal watch that helps cool down your body when you're having a...
I've been curious about that.
Yeah. Well, she loves it. She swears by it. So we were sort of trading, take these supplements or take this, different sort of tactical and product-oriented solutions. But we were also saying, we don't want to turn menopause into one more thing that we all need to hack perfectly or pay for relief from, because that leaves behind women who can't afford a, very expensive thermal watch. And so we are also invested in the cultural change around this, of just making it that it should be that in medical school, doctors are trained that when a woman comes and talks about menopause, you have a couple of lines that you could rely on that acknowledge this is a big deal. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of the private solution, hack your own menopause approach versus how do we just have a bigger cultural conversation and have collective solutions so that this doesn't become one more thing that every woman's oh my God, now I have to figure out everything. Yeah.
Yeah, there's widespread agreement that there needs to be more discussion of it in medical school. And various surveys have shown that doctors crave more education about menopause in medical school. And that in surveys, many of them say, I don't know what to tell women if they come to me complaining of menopausal symptoms, that they are admitting to their own lack of information. And simply because of the way that medical schools are structured, it's been explained to me, often they're working in clinics where the level of health problems are so severe that menopause is kind of low on the list. And also time is limited in medical school. So it's not a life or death proposition for most people. And so it's not as high a priority as some of the other, illnesses of aging. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be taken seriously. I mean, women's suffering matters, and doctors should be trained in not just how to treat it, but how to talk to women and help them understand whatever risks, do come with it. Because that's the most commonly known perception of menopausal hormone therapy, is that it's going to cause breast cancer, it's going to put you at high risk for stroke, but it's, there's some unknowns in there. So how do you help a woman understand a statistic like after 5 years, you raise your risk of breast cancer by 26%? It's not a quick conversation, right? It's there's some math involved, but it's worth doing. It's worth finding a way.
One thing, Susan, I wanted to get your take on is we have to have these conversations, especially for those of us in hetero relationships with men, right? I love that your editor was prompted by a male editor. That makes me very happy. But so many men, if women don't know what menopause, oh my gosh, so many men really don't know what menopause is. Did you find anything in your reporting and writing about how men are coming along in this conversation?
I will say this. I mean, a friend of mine was, having some joint pain, and I truly don't know if it was, menopausal related pain or not. She said, I've got to go to my sports orthopedist guy in a couple of days. And I did think, okay, well, that person's not going to raise the possibility that your symptoms are menopausal. So I will, because there is just no way in hell that the sports orthopedist guy is going to be like, so how old are you? Well, let me ask you something. Are you still getting your period? Are you having hot flashes? I mean, these are questions that doctors of all kinds, including psychiatrists, including neurologists, certainly rheumatologists, when they see a woman between 48 and 54, loosely, who's having a new acute symptom, it should dawn on that person. Women who think they're going through long COVID, I certainly believe in long COVID. I know it exists. That said, if a woman comes to a doctor and she's 52 and she says, I'm not sleeping right, I have brain fog, I have strange pains, I don't know what's going on, he should look at her and say, how old are you? I think before you go down a million tests, try 2 weeks of an estrogen patch and see if it helps.
Okay, here's our next insight. Everyone needs to start having this conversation. Women need to have this conversation with one another. one-on-one, in groups, on text threads, everywhere and anywhere. Doctors and nurses need to have these conversations in medical schools so that they're prepared to talk with their patients. And guys, we need you to be open to these conversations with your partners, your mom, your friends. Maybe a good place to start is listening to this very episode right now. Kudos. Send it to all your guy friends. Okay, more in a moment. We'll be right back. This episode is brought to you by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos. But it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, and automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations, so you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. This episode is brought to you by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos. But it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, identify the training that your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, and automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations, so you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI.
Apple Card is the credit card created by Apple. You earn 3% daily cash back up front when you use it to buy a new iPhone 15, AirPods, or any products at Apple. And you can automatically grow your daily cash at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings is available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility. Savings accounts by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, member FDIC. Terms apply.
Here at How To, we've helped you learn how to bargain like an FBI hostage negotiator, how to make humor your superpower, and how to have the best sex of your life. You're welcome. Now listen, it's time for you to help your fellow listeners, and you can do that by simply sending us an email or calling the How To hotline. If you have a dilemma that needs to be solved, we want to hear about it. Send us a note at howto@slate.com or leave us a voicemail at 646-495-4001. We might just have you on the show. That's howto@slate.com or 646-495-4001. We're back with Susan Dominus of the New York Times and our listener, Katie. Now, this conversation reminds me of an article written by the great Gloria Steinem in 1978. It's called If Men Could Menstruate, and we'll link to it in the show notes. You really should read the full piece, but in short, Steinem asks, what would happen if, by some stroke of magic, men could menstruate? Her answer is hilarious. She said, menstruation would become a boast-worthy masculine event. Men would brag about how long and how much. Now, take Steinem's question even further. What if men went through menopause? How would our cultural conversation about it be different? How would research and treatment be different?
Wanda Sykes, the comedian, was having a hot flash on air in some interview, and she just made no bones about it.
I am in the middle of a hot flash. You see me sweating like this? What the hell?
Do you need some water?
I need a fan.
That?
I need. Is this water? I'm just gonna pour this right over my head. Jesus.
She was really uncomfortable in a minute. She said, I'm having a hot flash.
Live Sykes. TV, folks,
That's
right here.
Right here. Yeah.
I usually travel with a fan, but I didn't bring it out. Look at me. Good Lord, I look like Mike Tyson. Look at this.
You look good.
Sweet Jesus.
You look great right now.
Okay, so that's Wanda Sykes having a hot flash in real time. And then this is her talking about them on her Netflix special.
All of a sudden, you just flop sweat. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to pass out. They're awful. They're awful. There's no way in the world men will put up with hot flashes. No way in the world. I think if a man had 2 hot flashes, they would blow the sun up.
No, I start out my piece by saying, imagine that if men were like tearing off their hoodies and like running to the bathroom to splash water on their faces. Imagine that their penises were, shriveling in size and becoming uncomfortable or even painful during sex. Is there any universe in which the world would stand for that the world, still controlled by men would stand for that? I really do find it hard to believe. I do.
Yeah. Now, another conversation we have to have is with our mothers, right? You talk about how many of our menopausal experiences will mirror that of our mothers. Not necessarily always, but that's one indication. Katie, have you talked to your mom about her menopause journey?
A little bit. It's interesting. My mom's from a generation that felt really that menopause was something you should keep really private. And so she was not super into the idea of sharing her menopause. Like, I don't even think she would find the term menopause journey very appropriate.
Do you think she's going to listen to this episode, Katie?
No, my mom does not know how to access podcasts. If I play it for her, which, I certainly would do. She did tell me she was one of the women who she had been prescribed hormone replacement therapy and then had it, they were like, oh, no, now you have to get off of it because of the concerns that you mentioned in your article. And she felt really frustrated by that process because her experience on the hormone replacement therapy was quite helpful. And then when she had to go off it, it was, she had really bad hot flashes, and she was a kindergarten teacher for most of her career. And she found it really difficult and challenging to, kind of keep up in the classroom with like little toddlers and stuff.
Wow. So, yeah. It's funny. A friend of mine told me that that she looks back. Her mom had a very tough menopause transition, but by the time her mom went through menopause, the kids were out of the house and her career was sort of quieting down. But for women who have kids older, you can be going through menopause and still have, 11, 12-year-old, 13-year-old kids, running around. And that's a lot harder. And I always thought, I'm going to turn 50 and I'm going to hit menopause just as I have kids who are becoming lunatic teenagers and parents who are just starting to get really aged. And, at this stage in your life when you're supposed to be kind of taking like a victory lap, instead you're both having physical symptoms. Your kids are at a difficult age. Your parents might be at a difficult age. So fortunately, I have to say all those things did not coincide. And in fact, my teenagers are quite nice most of the time. And my parents, knock on wood, are in good health. But you can see that for many women, all these three things do hit.
In terms of timing, I think I'm likely to find myself winning that triple crown, so to speak, and I hope my experience is similar to Susan's. I'll take the merciful teenagers and the healthy parents, please. Thank you very much. And speaking of parents, here's our next insight. If you're able, talk to your mother about her experience with menopause. It just might inform your own journey, and her perspective is going to be helpful to you in the long run.
I mean, it's funny because one of the things I say is we should, menopause is a time in your life when you should feel more in control of your life than at any other time since the time you've had your period, because you are not at risk for having your life be hijacked by an unwanted pregnancy. But it is also a time of great confusion. I obviously think that women should be able to have a conversation, an open conversation with their doctors about menopausal hormone therapy. But I have plenty of friends who skipped it altogether, went through the hot flashes, went through the sleeplessness, maybe even went through kind of hell, and then ended up on the other side. And I just know for those women, they were really glad that they kind of, in their mind, got through. And I think they did feel a tremendous sense of liberation.
I've been thinking about how we can, at the risk of sounding kind of cheesy, reclaim menopause. I mean, we talk so much about the hard parts of it, the hot flashes, the awkward conversations with our doctors, the rage. But what about the potential liberation of it? Is there a way to create a ritual or something that helps us keep in touch with a significant milestone? I asked Katie and Susan about it.
I mean, yes, I'm always drawn to ritual. Like you mentioned our women's group meeting, that was like the most fun I've had in the last year. Honestly, it was so fun, that conversation. Wow. And it was so safe. and I did leave that conversation with dreams of like, bleeding under a full moon with my sister. And stuff like that. So, sometimes it's interesting, like one of our friends in the group has like so much knowledge to offer around herbal remedies and salves and things that are kind of more witchy in nature. And that is very intriguing to me.
Susan, this will tell you everything you need to know about our women's group, that this particular person who knows all the things about herbs, we were like, send us the list and make sure you put one fake herb in the list so we can all see if we can pick out which one it is, because we thought that would be hilarious. So she put, wasn't it pussywort? Katie?
Oh, that's so
So
great.
we're like, how many of us went to the pharmacy and we're like, I can't find the pussywort, but I hear it helps with menopause.
I love that. That's awesome.
Really funny.
That's so great.
I wonder, Susan, did you run across anyone who's ritualized it? I just find it interesting because I remember when I got my period, my like very second wave feminist mom like really wanted me to like have a period party or do some kind of ritual, and I was like, she didn't know. We are not Jewish. No, but she wanted to like do something sweet and ritualistic around it, and I was absolutely against it. Yeah, I was like, absolutely not. And I can only imagine my own daughter will give me the same treatment as is the karmic right. But when you're older, like you can be open to ritual. And I'm not saying it doesn't have to be like some Wiccan thing under the moon, although I love the direction you're taking it, Katie. But I'm just wondering, Susan, if you heard of anybody trying to create ritual around this.
Well, it's really funny. A friend of mine where I live actually did have, I think when she turned 50, she called it like a crone party. And she was trying to reclaim the word crone in an interesting way. And it was she led a really beautiful women's circle, and there was a lot of lovely meaning making and meditation exercises and bonding with each other. And I have to say, it was one of the first times I have heard women go around a circle and talked about what they were experiencing in an open way. And this was easily 4 or 5 years ago. And it blew my mind. It kind of scared the hell out of me, to be honest. But I thought I appreciated that she was trying to create ritual around it. I think, it's funny. My friends and I were supposed to go away for our 50th birthdays, and then COVID hit. So I think we went away celebrating our 51st birthdays. And by default, because it was something that we were all going through, we ended up talking about it for, I think we talked about it for like 20% of the time that we were away for 3 days or 4 days. We talked about it and what we were going through. Why was it so hard to find relief? I do wish we had actually stopped and been and had a moment and said, you know what? Let's toast us in this moment. Let's have a memory of us being together while we're all going through this. It would have been lovely to have just been like, wait, we're going through something here. Let's recognize it doesn't have to be, sort of witchy. It could be witchy. That could be wonderful, but it could also just be the kinds of things that we do. You have like a big cake and a bottle of champagne and you hug each other and you recognize that something's happening the way that you recognize other big moments in your lives. And I think doing it with women friends is a beautiful thing. What I haven't gotten to the point of imagining is how do you celebrate it with your partner, whatever that partner's gender. I maybe speak for myself here when I say you're afraid your partner's going to wake up. You're going to say like, I'm going through menopause. Your partner's going to be like, oh yeah, I was finding you less attractive now that you mention it. You know what I mean? You don't want to draw attention to it. But I actually think there should be more thought devoted to how couples can make it something that they're going through together and sharing and not embarrassed about or not, suffering through privately, or I don't know what it is, but I haven't heard that conversation either. And I think it should be a conversation.
I love that. That's beautiful.
Me too.
So one last question. I'm just thinking of how lucky the three of us are to have so many women friends in our lives. Hearing about your trip sounds so beautiful, Susan.
Yes.
There are people who don't feel like they have a lot of women friends that they can talk to about this stuff. For them, where can they start? I mean, first of all, read Susan's article. We'll put it in show notes.
So sweet.
As Katie and I have attested, it's a real conversation opener. Maybe you can send the article to a couple of people and just say like, hey, have you thought about this or whatever? Are there any other things that come to mind for either of you of what someone in that position might do to sort of start their own journey of understanding this better and maybe being a little bit of a public force for talking about it.
There is a new nonprofit that was started by a wonderful woman named Donna Klassen. Let me look for, I think it's called Let's Talk Menopause, Menopause Advocacy. And I would be shocked if they didn't also have, first of all, they have tons of information. And they're working on advocacy and legislation for better, medical care around it and better education in medical schools. So I recommend that, first of all, because it's totally free. There's a business called Alloy that prescribes hormones. So you might not want to get your hormones from someone who has a sort of profit margin coming from it, but they do have support groups, and I've sat in on some of them, and they were really, really touching and powerful. And there's also a telehealth company called MIDI, M-I-D-I. It's not in all states, but they have doctors who are trained, they're OBGYNs who are trained in menopausal care. So it's just like, and it's covered by, many health insurances, and they can prescribe, but they don't make profit from the prescriptions. They just can prescribe. So I think that that's a really good resource for a lot of women, also because it's just so accessible. It's, you don't know if you walk into your local OBGYN, whether she or he or they have been trained in menopausal care, but at MIDI, everybody has.
Those are great. Super practical. Katie, anything come up for you as someone who's been on this journey of what someone without, a coven of friends might do?
No. I'm always looking for an excuse to make everything more witchy. So that's definitely my worldview. But this is more of a educational resource. I read a book called What Fresh Hell Is This by Heather Corinna, I think is her last. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I found that book just absolutely wonderful and so informative, but the tone is really empowering and light, very jargon light, just very accessible.
That's a great tip.
I have to jump in just because I also think that is a great tip. And also I recommend the Menopause Manifesto by Jennifer Gunter. I think is really, also very straightforward, really helps you really because it has the leisure of breaking down the statistics around, what has research told us is, it really breaks it down for you in a very helpful way. And, I also like to talk about this wonderful book of poetry by a woman named Moira Egan, and it's called Hot Flash Sonnets. And it is just a lovely, tripping, delightful, honest, beautiful series of poems about menopause. And I don't know, I just love it. I got a huge amount of pleasure from reading it.
That is the perfect note to end on. You two are just an absolute pleasure. Susan, your ability to explain what feels like very complicated stuff in just accessible feminist ways is just an absolute gift to all of us. And Katie, I'm just so grateful to you for doing this. I know it isn't easy to record a podcast like this. Your ability to just jump on and be real and ask your questions I'm just so grateful. So thank you.
I really appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure to meet you, Katie, and Courtney. It's wonderful to see you too.
Yeah, thank you both for having me. I'm really honored to have been a part of this.
Thank you again to Katie for sharing her story with us, and to Susan Dominus for all her useful advice. In our show notes, we'll link to Susan's article, Women Have Been Misled About Menopause, as well as the other books and resources that she and Katie mentioned. And by the way, just a quick, creepy update from Katie. She told me that basically all of her devices have been listening to her, and now she's getting served up all these targeted ads about menopause products, including, and I didn't even know this existed, there's a test you can take. It looks like a pregnancy test that tells you what your stage of menopause is. Bizarre. Okay, so sorry, Katie, we didn't mean to flood your advertisement with menopause, but maybe something will surface that's actually helpful. Do you have a shopping list full of herbs, one of which is hilariously fake? Or maybe you have another problem that needs solving. Send us a note at howto@slate.com or leave us a voicemail at 646-495-4001. And we might just have you on the show. And if you have a tip for how to handle menopause, we are all ears. Drop us a line. How To's executive producer is Derek John. Joel Meyer is our senior editor. The show is produced by Rosemary Belson with Kevin Bendis and Jabari Butler. Merritt Jacob is our senior technical director. Charles Duhigg created the show. Carvel Wallace is my co-host. I'm Courtney Martin. Thanks for listening. This show is brought to you by Discover. You know, in today's world, it seems the best treatment is reserved only for a few. Well, Discover wants to change that by making everyone feel special. That's why with your Discover card, you have access to 24/7 live customer service as well as $0 fraud liability, which means you're never held responsible for unauthorized purchases. Finally, no matter who you are or where you are in life, you'll feel special with Discover. Learn more at discover.com/creditcard. Limitations apply.